Hello, everybody, and welcome back to today's FB Live session. I'm your host, Dr. Kevin Hall, and today we'll be talking about one topic of ESG that's very dear to my heart, that is ESG standards. In particular, we'll be looking today at three standards, GRI, TCFD, and IFRS S1 and S2. Now, these are the three most common standards in Malaysia, but before I talk about that, I need to explain to you what a standard is. Now, standards are basically formats for your ESG reports. When you write an ESG report, you need to follow a particular order and a particular format, and these formats are known as standards, ESG standards. So let me just write that down. So standards are formats. That's right. So just like how when you write an essay, an informal letter versus a formal letter, you follow a particular order and format for each. If you're writing an informal letter, you might wonder, is it the same as a formal letter? Do I need to write my address and their address? And whose address do I put at the top? Is it mine or theirs? And do you need to do an underline? Do you need to write the date? Now, these are all particulars when you're following the format for writing either an essay in an informal essay or a formal essay. Just like that, we follow particular formats when we write our ESG reports. We could write our ESG report in the format of GRI, or we could follow the format of TCFD, or we could follow the format of IFRS S1 and S2. So I'll go into more detail right now, but for now, just have it in your mind. ESG standards basically mean the formats when you write your ESG reports. All right. So let's get accustomed to GRI, TCFD, SASB, and IFRS S1 and S2. These are, I would say, the most famous standards in the region. Now in Malaysia, we use GRI, we use TCFD, and we use IFRS S1 and S2. We don't really use SASB. This is more used in Singapore. We Malaysians, we kind of stick to the three, GRI, TCFD, and IFRS. So what do they stand for anyway? GRI stands for Global Reporting Initiatives. TCFD stands for Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, their standard. And the IFRS is the International Financial Reporting Standards, S1 and S2. They're the new kid on the block. They're the newest standard. Okay, let's go into detail. Oh, SASB, by the way, the ones that the Singaporeans use, it is known as the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. It's not just used by Singaporeans, by the way. It's just that we here in Malaysia don't really use it. So I refer to it as the one that they use. So let's get started with GRI. GRI is the most used standard in the whole world. Most companies use GRI, and for good reason, because it is the most simple and easy to understand, very intuitive. And it is sort of like the basic vanilla flavor when it comes to ESG reporting. Everyone kind of follows GRI in some way or some form because it's so easy. And not only is it easy, it's also very flexible. Flexible as in you can either report your ESG report, you can follow exactly all the GRI rules, and that's called being in accordance with. In accordance with GRI rules. And let's say you don't want to follow all the rules, you just want to follow half of all the rules in GRI, you can do that. And that's what you would say you are reporting with reference to GRI. So the difference between in accordance with GRI or your ESG report being with reference to GRI is how exactly you follow the GRI formula. All right? And all right, so let's say you've chose GRI as your format for reporting your ESG report. So you want to know how to go into the GRI reporting. So there are a few things you need to know. There are the universal standards that you will be reporting on, and you will be reporting on sector standards, which is the sector-specific standard that you'll be following for your company's standards. Like for example, for i-Chem solution, we'll be following the chemical industry sector guidelines. And after the sector standards, you would report on your general topic standards. Now I'll go into each now. So your universal standards are divided into three. There's GRI 1, there's GRI 2, and there's GRI 3. GRI 1 is the foundation standard. Now, this is where basically you just put all of your details of your company or organization, the name, the address, how many people work there, and so on. And you talk about reporting principles. For the whole of the report, you're going to be telling them how you got to all of your data points, how accurate you were measuring everything, and so on and so forth. That's just the foundation, GRI 1. And under Universal Standards, there's also GRI 2, General Disclosures. General Disclosures. And GRI, now, General Disclosures is just some things you want to disclose about your company, general things, like where it's at, what it's doing in general. All right, and then GRI 3 talks about material topics. So you're going to identify for your sector, your business, what what topics are important for your business to report on. For example, if you're an oil and gas company, you definitely want to report on your emissions and also your some things like your water and management and effluent management, something like that. But if you're an insurance company, reporting on your water management and your effluents may not be so relevant. That's an example. Now, I've gone, so these are all the universal topics, all right? Forgive my handwriting. Okay, so now we've talked about the universal. Now we talk about the sectoral standards and the topical standards. So sectoral standards, this is where you go down into the nitty-gritty and talk about exactly all of the things that you want to talk about that's expected of your sector, like I mentioned just now. And the topical standards depends on if you've identified any important topics your company definitely needs to focus on that it hasn't already focused on. So in a nutshell, if you want to report on GRI, this is the story. Next, I will teach you about how to report based on TCFD. Now, TCFD reports follow a very dynamic format that's very different from GRI. And basically, TCFD format ESG reports are very enticing to investors and to bankers and stakeholders because at a glance, they can see from your ESG report whether or not they want to invest in your company right away. And why I say that is because TCFD chooses an approach. It makes you report your ESG report based on two things, risks and opportunities. Now, risks and opportunities. So, you want to let the investors and the bankers know, based on your ESG report, how your company identifies what risks are there to your company, ESG risks, and how you manage those risks. And you also want to show in your ESG report to the bankers and investors how you're capitalizing on the ESG opportunities to make your business grow. So in risk, you've got to talk about your physical risks, and you've got to talk about your transitional risks. Now, what do these mean? Your physical risk can refer to acute risk or chronic risk. Acute risk could be like flash flooding. If your company is in a flood-prone area, your company is at risk in case climate change gets worse, flooding gets worse. When flooding happens, your company office is going to get flooded, your business operations are going to be halted. So this is a risk to your business, a physical risk. So these are examples of physical risk. And transitional risks are those risks that you can't really see, they don't happen physically, but they do affect your business, such as technology risks. Technology risks, meaning the technology of making the products or the products themselves become more advanced, that your products become obsolete. That's a technology risk. Market risk. Now, this is a risk to your business because, let's say, you're selling products that are not eco-friendly. And because the market changes, consumer behavior changes, and nowadays customers, they're moving towards a trend of they like eco-friendly products. If your product is not eco-friendly, you are at a market risk. And next, we talk about reputation risk. That's right, reputation. This is another transitional risk. It could be something that your company has done, like maybe your company has not been treating your foreign workers well, and it was published in the news. this company, company X, has been mishandling and has been abusing its foreign labor at their plantation. So this is a reputation risk that will hurt your company, because if you're not treating your workers well, you're doing something wrong with the S of ESG, and this ESG wrongdoing will affect your reputation. So these are transitional risks, and I've talked about physical risks. So you want to report in ESG report all of these risks to your business. Not only you need to report on what the risks are, you need to report on how your company handles and tackles these risks, manages and rises above all the problems. Next, we talk about opportunities. In TCFD reports, you need to report your ESG opportunities, such as resource efficiency, such as energy source, such as resilience. There we go. All right, so you've got a report how your company is capitalizing on the opportunities to better your company and its products and its service and offerings. Whether you're becoming more efficient in your resource usage, meaning you use less materials to produce your products, or you're using less energy, using less electricity, less water, less paper in your office space, for example, and your company is being very resilient due to being very prepared for the impacts of climate change and so on. So this is basically, in a nutshell, what you report on in the TCFD report. It's very dynamic, investors like it. Also, you need to follow the 4 pillars in TCFD reporting. 4 pillars. The governance pillar, governance. We talk about the strategy pillar. We talk about risk management as a pillar. And we talk about metrics and targets. So in your TCFD report, the standard formula or format that you follow is you talk about the governance structure, who in your company is in charge of the climate action policies, the KPIs related to ESG, and you talk about strategy, what strategies you put in place to manage the risks. And also talk about risk management, which is how you manage the risk. And you talk about metrics and targets. Now, these are basically what your goals are in terms of ESG. Say, for example, by 2030, company X plans to reduce their carbon emissions by 30% or 50% or 100%. It's up to you. But you've got to have targets and metrics that investors and bankers can see at a glance and say, oh, this is very impressive. And you've got to show how you want to meet those targets as well. And after that, we also need to talk about TCFD. It's very special because they do something called climate-related scenario analysis. Climate-related scenario analysis. I won't go into too much detail into what this is, but just know it's a very important part of TCFD reports. Next, we will be talking about the standard that the Singaporeans like to use. I'm sorry, Singaporeans, if you're listening to this, it's not just you. There are 77 sector-specific standards in SASB. Now, SASB is a special standard because unlike GRI, unlike TCFD, TCFD and GRI say no matter what sector you come from, you can basically report on almost the same things other people are reporting if you feel like it. But for SASB, you kind of have to follow your specific sector guidelines. For example, if you're an insurance business, you're not going to follow the SASB guidelines for the banking industry, for example, or for the chemical industry, or for the plastic industry, or the manufacturing industry. If you're a manufacturing company, you follow the guidelines, the SASB guidelines for the manufacturing industry. It's that simple. So it is organized by sectors, and I'll just write it here. Organized by sectors. All right. Oh dear, there's no more ink on this, so I will change markers. All right. Now, each sector has its own metrics and technical protocols, as I've mentioned. And basically, how they report is instead of following 4 pillars, like in TCFD, they follow 5. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. First pillar is leadership and governance. Sort of like the governance in TCFD. And an example of leadership and governance would be something like business ethics. And second, pillar that they follow is social capital. Social capital. Now, example of social capital would be access and affordability. And next, we talk about number 3, human capital. An example of human capital would be how you take care of employees, employee health, and employee safety. And number 4, we talk about business and business model and innovation. There we go. So business model and innovation, we talk about how you create your supply chains to be very efficient, how you manage your supply chains. And next, the 5th pillar that they talk about in SASB is the environment, very important. Like ecological impact your business has on the environment, on our rivers, on our forests, and so on. So this is SASB in a nutshell. There are 77 different sector guidelines to follow, and they're all very comprehensive. So just moving on, because SASB is not something we use in Malaysia very much. So next we talk about IFRS S1 and S2. Now this is the big daddy of all of these standards. And why? It's because it's a standard that's very ambitious. So there are a lot of people have raised the question, saying, why can't we all just use the same standard and the same format for ESG reporting everywhere in the world so that we make it easy for people to see and compare the ESG data of different companies all over the world? Why not? Well, these people at ISSB and IFRS wanted to standardize everything by taking all the good parts from all of the other standards and meshing it all together and joining it into one super standard, basically. And that's the IFRS S1 and S2. So, the IFRS S1 and S2 takes all the good parts from all of the famous standards and protocols and puts it all together and into a very nice package. And it's the newest standard on the block. So let's talk about the IFRS in detail. So, right. The IFRS S1 and S2, like I mentioned, they take all the good parts from the other standards. So basically what I'm going to write here is what I've already written for the other standards. So the IFRS, we talk about sustainability risks. Sustainability risk. Now, sustainability risk, you can see, is basically what's reported in TCFD. They talk about risks. They talk about risk here as well. And for the IFRS S1 and S2, you talk about sustainability opportunities. Now, this is what you saw in TCFD as well, opportunities. And you also talk about sustainability related financial information. I'll just write info. All right, this is basically what they like to see, investors and bankers as well, in your ESG report. Next, we'll be talking about in S1 and S2, IFRS S1 and S2, we talk about industry-specific topics. Industry-specific topics, meaning that specific to your industry, you follow some topics to your industry. Reminds you of something? Exactly. That was what we saw in SASB. So this is basically the part from SASB, whereas these parts are from TCFD. And you also follow the 4 pillars just like in TCFD. 4 pillars, which are governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets, just like TCFD. And in IFRS S1 and S2, you also talk about GHG emissions based on GHG protocol. Now, I haven't talked about GHG protocol yet. Just know GHG protocol is a very important standard for reporting your GHG accounting process. So GHG emissions are based on GHG protocol. So you can see here, S1 and S2, they kind of take things from TCFD, they take things from SASB, and they kind of take things from GRI and also GHG protocol. So all of these things make the S1 and S2, IFRS S1 and S2, very comprehensive standard to follow. But not many people are following it yet because it's still relatively new on the block. So That's it for my presentation today about the common standards used in Malaysia. I just want to reiterate for everyone's benefit, GRI, TCFD, and IFRS are the ones used in Malaysia. SASB is a famous standard, not so much used here, but it's good to know. With that, I thank you all very much for your attention, and please click the link down below for your free consultation.